Hello, I'm John Sluter, and this is the second part in the series on crimes against peace officers and defending yourself, or if you're a lawyer, defending your client. And I'm going to talk a little bit about jury trials. And I'm going to talk about the difficulty of jury trials. And then I'm going to do a segment on discovery, because that's what you can do to make your jury trial easier. I understand that some branches of the forces had mottos like train hard, fight easy, and when I get to discovery, we'll talk about doing a lot of discovery so that the trial is easy, and then we'll talk about some of the things you can do as far as presentation of your case. That'll be the next two videos after this. Okay, but let's talk about some of the difficulties of trials involving crimes against peace officers. I'm going to talk about three problems. And the first problem is that these are very political cases because police officers and police agencies are very interested in them for fairly obvious reasons. And quite frankly, the worse their officers messed up, the more interested in them they are. We talked about the Heck versus Humphreys case. If they can get your client convicted, they're quite far toward preventing somebody from suing them for using excessive force or for making a false arrest. So they're very political cases, and quite frankly, every district attorney's office and every elected district attorney wants to get along real well with the police agencies, because if he doesn't, he's going to have a hard time keeping his job. And I'm not saying the district attorneys are spineless. They're not. Some of them are very brave. Some of them are very passionate, but most of them want to keep their jobs. That's just the reality. So they will be keenly interested in these kinds of cases. And you will find in most cases that the prosecution is relatively aggressive, relatively assertive, relatively unwilling to let go of a case even if it starts looking like a real bad case. Sometimes they do get dismissed. I had a client who was arrested, shouldn't have been arrested. What he was arrested for ended up being plea bargain for just an infraction. Everybody just wanted to get rid of it. But he was taken to jail in the meantime, and when he was in jail, the officer was processing him in the search and uncuff room and asked him some questions having to do with his medical conditions. The client didn't want to talk about his medical conditions, and he had his reasons for that, but the officer figured this guy needs to get a little bit of discipline, so he just sort of like follows orders in the future while he's a guest of the sheriff. So this old guy, he's 68 years old. He's handcuffed. His hands are handcuffed behind his back. The deputy tells him to stand up. He stands up. The deputy tells him to face the cement wall. He faces the cement wall, and then the deputy starts kicking his feet really wide. I mean, just really wide, uncomfortably wide, particularly for a man that age. So the man's quite, the man being processed in is quite unbalanced. He wasn't my client, he was somebody else's client, but I've seen the tape. Anyway, then the officer, former football player, college and high school, rears back, plants his foot behind him, and shoves this old man's head into the wall, into a cement wall, with as much force as he can muster. Takes the old man about a year to recover this because of the injury to his head. So naturally, the officer files a battery against a peace officer. The guy kicked him. but there was a videotape. And the videotape, of the intake area wasn't furnished to the district attorney at the time of filing, but at a certain point, the alert defense attorney asked for it. It was given to her. She looked at it. She said to the district attorney, the head of the office there, I really ought to look at this. He did, at which point the case was immediately dismissed. That happens sometimes. But ordinarily, without that kind of proof that the officer engaged in some kind of wrongdoing, these cases there's going to be a plea or they're going to go to trial. And they're not necessarily easy to win. I mean, we've all heard about the presumption of innocence. Most defense attorneys will tell you that it's, as a practical matter, not where most jurors are coming from. And I think that's particularly true in these kinds of cases of crimes against peace officers. And the way I understand it and the way I explain it is a book in the Bible, but it's also great literature. It's a very keen book, very keen insights. And it's called the Book of Job. And the Book of Job is about a guy who was innocent, maybe like the guy who's been arrested for a crime against peace officer. I mean, he's a good man, not just doesn't do anything wrong, but does a lot of good stuff too. And all of a sudden, his children are killed, his wealth is wiped out, and his health is destroyed. And he's sitting in ashes, scratching his sores on his skin with pot shards. And he has three really good friends, Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz. And they sit with him for 7 days. Okay, these are good men. I mean, if that kind of stuff happened to you, how many friends do you have who are going to sit with you in silence for 7 days? These are good men. These are righteous men. These are wise men. But they start arguing with Job, and Job starts arguing with them. And as this argument progresses, you can the language of Zophar, Bildad, and Eliphaz becomes more and more violent and angry. And you kind of get a sense of what's going on because they're good men. And they figure that because they're good men, the Almighty's not going to do to them what he's done to Job. And Job is defending himself. And the more Job defends himself, the more angry these guys get, and the more vigorous they get and try to persuade Job that he must have done something wrong. He must have deserved this. And the reason I'm telling that story is because every juror, almost every juror that walks into the courtroom is Bildad, Eliphaz, or Zophar. There's a guy sitting there next to a criminal defense attorney who's been accused of a crime against a peace officer. And they figure that that'll never be them because they never do anything wrong. And if they were to really think that this person didn't do anything wrong, then that'd be very frightening. Scratch anger, fear bleeds. Zophar and Bildad and Eliphaz and most jurors are really frightened of the thought that you can do nothing wrong and get arrested, go to jail, face more jail time or even prison. It's a very frightening thought. And I'm not saying this because I'm putting down jurors. I'm just saying that any more than I'm putting down these three friends of Job. They were good and righteous men. Jurors are good and righteous people. But it helps us go to sleep at night. It helps us leave our front doors in the morning if we think that nothing bad's going to happen to us because we're good people. And if this can happen to good people, blameless people, a very frightening thought. And to convince a juror of that, you're taking away some measure of their peace of mind, and that's a hard battle. Nobody wants to give up their peace of mind. It's much easier to think the guy over there must be guilty. Okay. Again, I'm not criticizing people for holding this opinion. A righteous person not only can hold that opinion, it's likely to hold that opinion. That's what you're dealing with if you're a defendant. That's what your lawyer's dealing with if he's defending you. You might as well get used to that. We'll talk about strategies to overcome that in another video.